The air was sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth, the kind of morning where the forest exhaled a cool, living breath. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, the Shenandoah National Park stretched out in a tapestry of rolling ridges and dense hardwoods, its trails winding like veins through the wilderness. On October 12, 2018, Clara Hensley, a 28-year-old graphic designer with a penchant for solitude, laced up her hiking boots at the trailhead of the Laurel Creek Loop. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the autumn leaves in shades of amber and crimson, and Clara, as always, felt the pull of the mountains like a heartbeat. Clara was no stranger to these trails. She'd grown up in nearby Staunton, where the Blue Ridge was less a destination and more a way of life. As a child, she'd scamper through the woods with her older brother, Ethan, collecting smooth river stones and chasing fireflies until their mother called them home. As an adult, her love for the outdoors deepened into something almost spiritual. She hiked alone most weekends, her backpack stocked with a sketchbook, a water bottle, and a small journal where she jotted down thoughts or quick sketches of a landscape. "The mountains don't judge," she told her partner Mia once. "They just are." Mia, a nurse who preferred the comfort of their cozy apartment, would roll her eyes but smile, knowing Clara's hikes were her way of recharging, of finding clarity in a world that often felt too loud. That morning, Clara had risen before dawn. She'd kissed Mia's forehead, still warm with sleep, and whispered, "Back by lunch. Love you." Mia mumbled something incoherent, used to these early departures. Clara's routine was predictable. A quick drive to the park, her silver Honda Civic parked at the Laurel Creek trailhead, and a 3-hour loop that took her through a steep climb to a ridge with a view of the Shenandoah Valley. She'd posted a quick photo on Instagram at 6:47 a.m., a shot of her boots against the gravel trailhead, captioned, "Chasing Sunrise." Her phone's location data pinged at the parking lot, and then, as was her habit, she switched it to airplane mode to save battery and avoid distractions. She wanted nothing between her and the forest. By 1 p.m., Mia was pacing their apartment, her phone clutched in one hand. Clara was never late without a text or call. At first, Mia assumed a flat tire or a delayed start. Clara could lose herself sketching a gnarled oak or a deer in the distance. But as the clock ticked past 2 o'clock, a knot of worry tightened in Mia's chest. She called Clara's phone, knowing it was likely off, and left a voicemail, her voice steady but edged with unease. "Hey, babe, just checking in. You okay? Call me when you get this." By 3 o'clock, she was in her car, driving the 20 minutes to the trailhead, her mind cycling through rational explanations. Maybe Clara had twisted an ankle, or her car wouldn't start. The Laurel Creek parking lot was nearly empty when Mia arrived, save for Clara's Civic, parked neatly between the lines. It stood cool to the touch. The sight of it, untouched and ordinary, sent a chill through her. She scanned the lot, half expecting to see Clara trudging back, her chestnut hair tied in a loose braid, her face flushed from the hike. But the trailhead was silent, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the late afternoon breeze. Mia called out, "Clara? Clara!" Her voice echoed off the trees, unanswered. She walked a few steps down the trail, her sneakers crunching on gravel, but the path stretched into shadow, and she realized she had no idea where to begin. Back at the car, Mia noticed Clara's water bottle, a battered stainless steel one with the sticker of a mountain silhouette, sitting on the passenger seat. Her backpack, the one she always took hiking, wasn't there. Neither was her phone. Mia's hands trembled as she dialed 911, her words tumbling out in a rush. "My girlfriend's missing. She was hiking at Laurel Creek. Her car's here, but she's not. She was supposed to be back hours ago." The Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office responded quickly. Deputy Sarah Whitaker, a 15-year veteran with a no-nonsense demeanor and a soft spot for the park's trails, arrived within 30 minutes. She found Mia sitting on the hood of Clara's car, her face pale, her eyes darting toward the trailhead, as if Clara might appear at any moment. Whitaker took notes as Mia recounted Clara's routine, her love for the park, and the last time they'd spoken. "She's hiked this trail 100 times," Mia said, her voice cracking. "She knows it like the back of her hand. Something's wrong." Whitaker surveyed the scene. The parking lot was a small gravel clearing, bordered by a wooden signpost marking the Laurel Creek Loop. Beyond it, the trail dipped into a dense thicket of oak and hickory, the canopy so thick it filtered the sunlight into a dappled glow. There were no signs of a struggle, no scuff marks, no dropped items. Just the car, locked and undisturbed, and the vast, silent forest. Whitaker radioed for backup and a ranger from the National Park Service, knowing the terrain would demand more than a quick sweep. As dusk settled, the first search teams arrived. Park rangers, led by Ranger Tom Carver, a wiry man in his late 40s, with a deep knowledge of the park's 200,000 acres, began organizing volunteers. Clara's brother, Ethan, arrived an hour later, his face a mask of determination, despite the red-rimmed eyes that betrayed his fear. He'd driven from Richmond, where he worked as a high school teacher, after Mia's frantic call. "She's out there," he said to Whitaker, his voice firm. "Clara's tough. She wouldn't just vanish." The initial search focused on the Laurel Creek Loop, a 6-mile trail that wound through rocky outcrops and along a creek bed before climbing to a ridge. Carver briefed the team. Clara was likely wearing her usual hiking gear, navy leggings, a green fleece, and a gray backpack with reflective strips. She was fit, experienced, and unlikely to stray far from the trail. Yet the park was vast, with countless side paths, ravines, and dense underbrush where someone could lose their way or be hidden. By nightfall, the search had grown to include K9 units, their handlers guiding German shepherds through the undergrowth, their noses low to the ground. Flashlights bobbed in the darkness, casting long shadows across the trees. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping into the low 40s, and Mia wrapped herself in a blanket from Whitaker's patrol car, refusing to leave the trailhead. Ethan stayed close, his hand resting on her shoulder, both of them staring into the forest as if willpower alone could summon Clara back. At 9:17 p.m., one of the K9 handlers, a young woman named Rachel, reported a faint hit, a scent trail near a fork in the path, about a mile from the trailhead. The dog, a shepherd named Max, had paused at a cluster of rocks, his ears pricked, before losing the scent in the damp earth. The team combed the area, their lights sweeping over moss-covered stones and fallen leaves, but found nothing definitive. A single item caught their attention, a blue shoelace, frayed at one end, tangled in a patch of briars. It wasn't much, but it was something. Whitaker bagged it, noting its location, though she warned Mia and Ethan not to get their hopes up. "Could be hers," she said, her tone measured. "Could be anyone's." As the first night stretched on, the search teams regrouped at the trailhead. Carver spread a topographic map across a folding table, its contours illuminated by a lantern. The Laurel Creek Loop was a small fraction of the park's labyrinthine trails, and beyond it lay miles of unmarked paths, cliffs, and hollows. "She could be anywhere," he said quietly, more to himself than to the others. Mia overheard, her face crumpling, and Ethan pulled her into a hug, whispering, "We'll find her. We will." The forest, so inviting in the morning light, now felt like a living wall, its shadows swallowing the beams of their flashlights. The wind carried the faint howl of a distant coyote, and the weight of the unknown pressed down on everyone. Clara Hensley, with her sketchbook and her love for the mountains, was gone, her absence as vast and unyielding as the wilderness itself. The search would continue at first light, but as the stars emerged above the ridge, a quiet dread settled over the trailhead. Something was wrong in the Blue Ridge, and no one could say what. The first light of October 13th, 2018, broke over the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting a pale gold glow across the Shenandoah National Park. The Laurel Creek trailhead buzzed with activity as search teams reassembled, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. The scent of pine mingled with the faint tang of coffee from thermoses passed among volunteers. Clara Hensley had been missing for nearly 24 hours, and the urgency was palpable, a current running through every shouted instruction and hurried step. Mia stood at the edge of the parking lot, her eyes bloodshot, clutching a photo of Clara, her chestnut hair loose, her smile wide against a backdrop of autumn leaves. Ethan, beside her, scanned the growing crowd, his jaw tight, as if searching for answers in the faces of strangers. The Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office, led by Deputy Sarah Whitaker, coordinated with the National Park Service to orchestrate a massive search effort. Ranger Tom Carver, his weathered face etched with focus, divided the volunteers into grids. Each team assigned a segment of the Laurel Creek Loop and its surrounding offshoots. The park's 200,000 acres were a daunting expanse, rugged ridges, dense forests, and hidden ravines that could conceal a person indefinitely. Carver's voice was steady as he briefed the group. Clara's experienced, but the terrain's unforgiving. Stay sharp, stay in pairs, and report anything that looks out of place. The search teams fanned out, equipped with topographic maps, radios, and GPS units. K9 units, including Rachel and her German Shepherd Max, took the lead, their noses sweeping the ground for Clara's scent. Drones hummed overhead, their cameras scanning the canopy for any sign of her gray backpack or green fleece. Volunteers, many of them local hikers who knew the trails, called Clara's name, their voices echoing through the trees. The forest responded with the rustle of leaves and the distant chatter of a woodpecker, indifferent to their desperation. Mia and Ethan were barred from joining the search teams. Too emotional, Whitaker explained gently, to make rational decisions in the field. Instead, they helped at the command post, a makeshift setup of folding tables and a tent near Clara's Park Civic. Mia handed out water bottles, her hand shaking, while Ethan pored over maps with Carver, pointing out Clara's favorite spots. A clearing where she'd sketched wildflowers, a rocky outcrop with a view of the valley. She wouldn't leave the trail, Ethan insisted. She knows better. But his voice wavered, betraying the fear that Clara's disappearance wasn't a simple misstep. By mid-morning, a potential lead surfaced. A volunteer, a retiree named Carl who hiked the park weekly, reported seeing a woman matching Clara's description the previous morning near the trail's first mile marker. She'd been walking briskly, he said, her backpack bouncing as she headed uphill. He'd nodded at her, a common trail courtesy, and she'd returned a quick smile before disappearing around a bend. The sighting was time-stamped at roughly 7:15 a.m., consistent with Clara's Instagram post. Whitaker pressed Carl for details. Was she alone? Did she seem distressed? Carl shook his head. Looked normal. Just another hiker. But the lead gave the teams a focal point, narrowing their search to the upper loop. The K9 units retraced the path to the mile marker, Max's nose low to the ground. Rachel, his handler, watched him closely, noting how he paused at a cluster of ferns, his tail stiffening. He's got something, she called, and the team converged. They found nothing concrete, no footprints, no dropped items, but Max's reaction suggested Clara had been there. The trail was well-trodden, though, and recent rain had turned the earth to mud, obscuring tracks. The team marked the spot with orange flagging tape, but as they pushed deeper into the forest, the scent trail faded, swallowed by the damp air and the vastness of the terrain. As the day wore on, the search grew more complex. The Laurel Creek Loop was deceptively simple on a map, but its side trails and game paths branched into a maze of possibilities. Steep inclines led to cliffs where a fall could be fatal, and thick underbrush hid sinkholes and streams. Carver, who'd seen lost hikers found within hours and others never recovered, kept his tone optimistic but realistic. We're covering ground fast, he told Whitaker during a brief check-in. But this park, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a county. The community response was overwhelming. By noon, over 100 volunteers had joined, including Clara's co-workers from the graphic design firm in Staunton and members of her hiking group. Local businesses donated food and supplies, and a church group set up a prayer circle near the trailhead, their murmurs blending with the wind. Mia clung to the activity like a lifeline, but every hour, without news, chipped away at her hope. She kept replaying Clara's last words, back by lunch. Love you. And the image of her boots in that Instagram photo, the gravel trail stretching into the unknown. Around 3 p.m., another lead emerged. A ranger found a small item caught in a briar patch a quarter-mile off the main trail, a scrap of green fabric, torn and weathered, that might have come from Clara's fleece. It was bagged and sent to the sheriff's office for analysis, but Whitaker cautioned against optimism. Could be hers, she said to Mia. echoing her words from the night before about the shoelace. Could be anyone's. The uncertainty gnawed at Mia, who clutched the photo of Clara tighter, her thumb tracing the curve of her smile. Ethan, meanwhile, was relentless. He cornered every ranger and deputy, asking about search patterns, drone footage, even the weather forecast. "What if she's hurt?" he said to Carver, his voice low but urgent. "What if she's out there waiting for us?" Carver met his gaze, his eyes kind but tired. "We're doing everything we can, son. We've got helicopters up tomorrow if we don't find her today." Ethan nodded, but his hands balled into fists, as if he could fight the forest itself to bring his sister back. By dusk, the search teams were exhausted, their boots caked with mud, their faces drawn. The drones had captured nothing but endless green, and the K9 units had lost Clara's scent in multiple directions, each trail leading to dead ends. The green fabric was sent for testing, but results would take days. Whitaker gathered the core team, Carver, Rachel, and a few senior volunteers, for a debrief. "We've covered 6 square miles today," she said, her voice steady but strained. "We'll expand tomorrow, bring in more air support. She's out there, and we're not stopping." Mia overheard, sitting on a camp chair with Ethan. She wanted to believe Whitaker's words, but the forest loomed beyond the trailhead, its shadows deepening as the sun sank behind the ridges. The volunteers began to disperse, promising to return at dawn, their voices subdued. Mia stayed, her eyes fixed on the trail, as if staring hard enough could summon Clara's figure from the darkness. Ethan sat beside her, silent, his hand resting on hers. The shoelace, the fabric, the witness sighting. They were fragments, pieces of a puzzle that refused to form a picture. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and the forest seemed to close in, its quiet more oppressive than any sound. The search would resume at first light, but for Mia and Ethan, the waiting was a torment of its own. Clara's absence was a void, vast as the mountains, and every unanswered call of her name echoed back with the same cruel silence. By the spring of 2019, the Shenandoah National Park had reclaimed its quiet beauty, the Laurel Creek trailhead blooming with wildflowers as if untouched by the frenzy of the previous fall. Clara Hensley's disappearance, once a headline that galvanized the community, had faded into a lingering ache, a mystery that refused to yield answers. 6 months had passed since that October morning when Clara vanished, and the search, once a fevered effort of helicopters, K9 units, and hundreds of volunteers, had dwindled to nothing. The case was officially cold, a term that felt like a betrayal to Mia and Ethan, who stood at the trailhead on April 12, 2019, staring at the same gravel path where Clara's silver Civic had been parked. The investigation had exhausted every lead. The blue shoelace found on the first night was confirmed to be Clara's, a match to the laces on her hiking boots, but it led nowhere. The scrap of green fabric, hoped to be from her fleece, was too degraded for conclusive testing. Carl's sighting of a woman matching Clara's description at 7:15 a.m. remained the last confirmed moment of her life, but the trail beyond the mile marker offered no further clues. The Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office, led by Deputy Sarah Whitaker, had combed through Clara's phone records, bank accounts, and social media, finding no signs of foul play or distress. Her phone, last pinged at the trailhead before going offline, was never found. Neither was her gray backpack. Mia and Ethan refused to let Clara's name fade. Mia, who had taken a leave from her nursing job, spent her days organizing vigils and updating a Facebook page, Find Clara Hensley, which grew to 12,000 followers. She posted photos of Clara, laughing at a bonfire, sketching by the creek, her hazel eyes bright with life, alongside pleas for tips. Ethan, meanwhile, quit his teaching job in Richmond and moved back to Staunton to be closer to Mia and the park. He printed flyers with Clara's face and the words missing, Clara Hensley, 28, last seen October 12, 2018, plastering them on every bulletin board, gas station, and trailhead within 50 miles. "Someone knows something," he'd say, his voice raw with conviction. "They just don't know they know it yet." The community's response, so fervent in those first weeks, had softened into sympathy. Locals still approached Mia at the grocery store, offering hugs and murmured hopes, But the search teams had disbanded, and the media had moved on to fresher tragedies. Ranger Tom Carver, who'd spent countless hours mapping the park's trails, still checked in with Mia and Ethan, but his calls grew less frequent. "We're not giving up," he told them at a memorial hike in December, where 200 people walked the Laurel Creek Loop in Clara's honor, carrying lanterns that flickered against the winter dusk. But even Carver's optimism felt hollow, weighed down by the park's vastness, 200,000 acres of silence that seemed to mock their efforts. Online, the case took on a life of its own. True crime forums on Reddit and web sleuths buzzed with speculation, some theories grounded, others wild. Amateur sleuths dissected Clara's Instagram posts, suggesting she'd been stalked or had wandered off trail to chase a sketch. One user, Trail Truth Seeker, posited that Clara had been abducted by a drifter, pointing to a string of unsolved disappearances in national parks. Another claimed the park's caves hid a serial predator, a theory that gained traction until Whitaker publicly debunked it, citing zero evidence. The speculation frustrated Ethan, who spent late nights scrolling through threads, torn between hope for a breakthrough and anger at the faceless theorizing. Mia, too, read the posts, her heart lurching at each new what if. But she banned herself from commenting after a sleepless week of arguing with strangers. In the fall of 2020, 2 years after Clara's disappearance, a related incident briefly reignited interest. A hiker, a 34-year-old man named Daniel Pruitt, went missing on a nearby trail in Shenandoah, his car found abandoned at a trailhead 10 miles from Laurel Creek. The similarities were eerie. A solo hiker, an experienced outdoorsman, vanishing without a trace. Search teams scoured the area, and Mia and Ethan joined a vigil, holding their breath for a connection to Clara. Whitaker's team investigated, hoping Pruitt's case might uncover a pattern, but after 3 weeks, Pruitt's body was found at the base of a cliff, his death ruled an accidental fall. The lead fizzled, leaving Mia and Ethan with a familiar ache. Hope raised, then crushed. The emotional toll was relentless. Mia moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Clara, unable to sleep in a bed that still smelled faintly of her lavender shampoo. She rented a small house in Staunton, where she kept Clara's sketchbooks stacked on a shelf, their pages filled with pencil drawings of the Blue Ridge, jagged peaks, curling ferns, a deer caught mid-leap. Ethan, meanwhile, became a fixture at the sheriff's office, pestering Whitaker for updates until she gently suggested he seek counseling. "I can't stop," he told her, his eyes hollow. "If I stop, it's like I'm letting her go." Whitaker, who'd seen families unravel under the weight of unsolved cases, nodded but said nothing, her own frustration mirrored in the files piling up on her desk. The park itself seemed to taunt them. Mia visited the Laurel Creek Trailhead monthly, sitting by Clara's favorite overlook, where the valley stretched out in a sea of green and gold. The forest was as beautiful as ever, its air thick with the hum of cicadas and the scent of earth. But it felt different now, less a sanctuary, more a thief. She'd trace her fingers over the trailhead sign, imagining Clara's boots crunching on the gravel, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. "Where are you?" Mia whispered, her voice swallowed by the wind. By 2021, 3 years after Clara vanished, the case was a ghost in the sheriff's office. Whitaker kept Clara's file active, but resources were stretched thin, and new cases demanded attention. The Find Clara Hensley page still saw occasional tips, a hiker claiming to have seen a woman's silhouette in the park, a camper reporting a strange man lingering near a trail, but none panned out. Ethan started hiking the park himself, retracing Clara's steps, as if the forest might whisper its secrets if he looked hard enough. He found nothing but the same endless trees, the same unyielding silence. The years wore on, and the world moved forward. Mia returned to nursing, her shifts a distraction from the void Clara left. Ethan took a part-time job at a hardware store, his evenings spent at the trailhead or poring over maps. The community still remembered Clara, her face on faded flyers, her name on a bench dedicated at the park's visitor center, but the urgency had dulled, replaced by a quiet resignation. The Blue Ridge, with its rolling ridges and shadowed hollows, held its secrets close, and Clara's absence became a part of its vast, unspoken history. On a damp morning in September 2023, 5 years after Clara Hensley vanished into the Shenandoah National Park, the Blue Ridge Mountains wore a shroud of mist. The air was heavy with the scent of wet leaves and moss, the kind of day where the forest seemed to hold its breath. At the edge of a remote clearing, 3 miles from the Laurel Creek trailhead, a retired botanist named Ellen Pritchard trudged through the underbrush, her border collie, Juniper, darting ahead. Ellen, 67, had spent her career studying the park's flora, and now, in retirement, she wandered its lesser-known paths, cataloging rare plants for a local conservation group. Juniper, her constant companion, sniffed the ground with restless energy, her black and white fur streaked with mud. The clearing was a quiet place, tucked between a granite outcrop and a tangle of rhododendrons, rarely visited by hikers. Ellen paused to examine a patch of lady slipper orchids. Their delicate yellow petals are rare, fine this late in the season. Juniper, meanwhile, veered toward a cluster of rocks, her nose buried in the earth. She pawed at the ground, whining, then began to dig with frantic purpose. "Juniper, easy girl," Ellen called, but the dog ignored her, flinging dirt with each swipe. Ellen approached, expecting a squirrel's cache or a buried bone. Instead, her breath caught as Juniper unearthed a tattered gray fabric, its reflective strips glinting faintly in the filtered sunlight. Ellen knelt, her heart quickening. The fabric was part of a backpack, its straps frayed but unmistakable. Pinned beneath a rock, half buried in the soil, was a small leather journal, its cover warped by years of exposure. Ellen's hands trembled as she brushed away the dirt, revealing a faint monogram, C.H. Clara Hensley. Inside the journal, pages were stuck together, but a few pencil sketches remained legible, a ridge line, a cluster of ferns, a quick outline of the Shenandoah Valley. Ellen, who'd followed Clara's case like everyone in Staunton, knew this was no coincidence. She leashed Juniper, who was still sniffing the bag, and dialed 911, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "I think I've found something. It's near Laurel Creek. You need to get here now." Within hours, the clearing was transformed into a crime scene. Deputy Sarah Whitaker, now a lieutenant, arrived with a forensic team from the Virginia State Police. The air buzzed with urgency, a stark contrast to the years of silence that had defined Clara's case. Mia and Ethan, notified by Whitaker, rushed to the park, their faces a mix of hope and dread. They weren't allowed near the site, but they waited at the trailhead, Mia clutching Ethan's arm, her eyes fixed on the path where rangers and deputies disappeared into the trees. The forensic team worked methodically, cordoning off the clearing with yellow tape. The backpack, confirmed as Clara's by its brand and the journal's monogram, was carefully extracted, along with a few personal items, a rusted keychain with a tiny compass, a waterlogged protein bar wrapper, and a single silver hoop earring, its mate missing. Most chilling was a scrap of cloth found nearby, stained and torn, later identified as part of a Navy legging, Clara's preferred hiking gear. The items were bagged and sent to the state lab in Richmond for analysis, with a priority request for DNA testing. Whitaker, her face grim, oversaw the operation, her mind racing. "This changes everything," she told Ranger Tom Carver, who joined the scene, his boots sinking into the muddy earth. She didn't just wander off. The discovery electrified the stagnant case. Media vans descended on Staunton, their satellite dishes sprouting like mushrooms along the park's entrance. The Find Clara Hensley Facebook page exploded with activity. Mia's posts flooded with comments from strangers and locals alike. Ethan, usually reserved, spoke to a reporter from a Staunton News leader, his voice raw. "This is proof she's out there. Or was. We're not stopping now." But privately, he confided to Mia, "What if this is all we get? Just her things?" Mia, her eyes red-rimmed, shook her head. "It's a start. It's more than we've had in years." In Richmond, the forensic team worked around the clock. The journal yielded no clear fingerprints, its pages too damaged by moisture, but the backpack's fabric held traces of DNA, human skin cells, likely from prolonged contact. The samples were run through CODIS, the National DNA Database, a process that could take days, but was expedited due to the case's profile. Meanwhile, Whitaker's team retraced the clearing's context. The site was off any marked trail, accessible only by a faint game path used by deer or the occasional poacher. It was a place someone would have to know, or intend to reach. The implications hung heavy. Clara's backpack hadn't been lost. It had been hidden. A week later, the lab called Whitaker with a hit. The DNA on the backpack matched a profile in Cody's, belonging to a man named Paul Vernon, a 42-year-old maintenance worker from Luray, a small town bordering the park. Vernon had a minor record, a 2009 arrest for trespassing on private land, dismissed with a fine, but nothing violent. He worked for a landscaping company that maintained park facilities, giving him access to remote areas. His name had never surfaced in Clara's case, but the DNA was undeniable. His skin cells were on her backpack, in quantities suggesting more than a casual encounter. Whitaker pulled Vernon's file, her pulse quickening. He was a local, born and raised in the Blue Ridge, with a reputation as a quiet, unassuming man who kept to himself. His co-workers described him as reliable, always willing to take the early shift or clear a trail after storm. But there was something else, a neighbor's offhand comment, logged during a routine canvass in 2018, that Vernon had been seen washing his truck late at night, days after Clara's disappearance, an unusual act for a man who lived alone. It hadn't seemed significant then, but now it loomed like a shadow. Mia and Ethan were briefed in Whitaker's office, a cramped space filled with files and maps. Whitaker was careful, her tone measured. "We have a lead, a strong one. DNA on Clara's backpack points to someone we're looking into, but we need more before we move." Mia's hand shook as she gripped a photo of Clara, her voice barely a whisper. Is there any chance she's alive?" Whitaker hesitated, her eyes softening. "We're working to find out. This is a step forward." Ethan, his jaw tight, said nothing, but his gaze burned with a question he didn't voice. "Who is he?" The investigation shifted into high gear. Whitaker's team began discreet surveillance on Vernon, tracking his movements. A gray pickup truck, a small cabin on the edge of Luray, a routine of early mornings at the park and evenings at a local bar. He was ordinary, almost invisible, blending into the fabric of the community. But the DNA told a different story, one that Whitaker and her team were determined to unravel. The clearing, with its buried secrets, had spoken after 5 long years, but the full truth remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of the Blue Ridge. As the forensic team processed more evidence, a new question emerged. What else had Vernon touched? The backpack was a lifeline, a tangible piece of Clara, but it raised a darker possibility. Was this an isolated act, or part of something larger? The forest, with its endless trails and silent hollows, held its breath, and the case, once cold, burned with new urgency. The autumn of 2023 cast a muted glow over the Shenandoah National Park, the Blue Ridge Mountains, cloaked in hues of rust and gold. The discovery of Clara Hensley's backpack had cracked open a case that had lain dormant for 5 years, and the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. Lieutenant Sarah Whitaker, her desk buried under maps and forensic reports, felt the weight of the breakthrough. The DNA matched to Paul Vernon, a 42-year-old maintenance worker from Luray, was the strongest lead they'd ever had. But it was only a thread, compelling, but not yet a rope to tie the case shut. Whitaker's team moved swiftly, building a profile on Vernon. He was a loner, living in a modest cabin on a wooded lot outside Luray. His life a quiet rhythm of early mornings clearing trails and evenings at the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar where he sipped beer and spoke little. His co-workers at the landscaping company described him as meticulous, always the first to volunteer for remote park jobs, clearing fallen trees, repairing signs in areas few visited. His 2009 trespassing charge, dismissed as a youthful misstep, now seemed less innocent. Whitaker's gut told her Vernon's unassuming demeanor was a mask, and the DNA on Clara's backpack was the first tear in it. Surveillance began in earnest. 2 deputies, posing as utility workers, staked out Vernon's cabin, a weathered A-frame with peeling paint and a gravel drive. His gray pickup, a 2010 Ford F-150, was often parked out front, its bed cluttered with tools and tarps. They noted his habits. He left for work at 5:30 a.m., returned by 4 p.m., and drove to the Rusty Anchor 3 nights a week. But there were oddities. Late-night drives into the park, his truck idling at obscure trailheads, sometimes for hours. One deputy, peering through binoculars, saw Vernon emerge from the woods with a flashlight, his expression unreadable, his boots caked with mud. "He's not hiking for fun," Whitaker muttered during a briefing, her team nodding in grim agreement. The forensic lab in Richmond provided more fuel. The DNA on Clara's backpack, skin cells on the straps, was a 99.9% match to Vernon, confirmed through a second test. Trace evidence on the Navy legging scrap found nearby revealed microscopic fibers from a type of wear gloves sold at hardware stores across Virginia, including the one where Ethan now worked. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough for a warrant. Whitaker's team secured permission to search Vernon's cabin and truck, coordinating with the Virginia State Police for a dawn raid on October 3, 2023. The raid was swift and quiet. At 5 a.m., as the sky blushed pink over the Blue Ridge, Whitaker led a team of 6 to Vernon's cabin. They knocked, announced themselves, and entered when no answer came. The interior was sparse, a sagging couch, a wood stove, a table littered with park maps. But in a locked shed out back, they found a cache that sent a chill through the team. A box containing women's jewelry, a silver hoop earring matching the one from Clara's backpack, a delicate bracelet, a hair clip with a floral design. There were also photos, grainy and taken from a distance, of women hiking alone in the park. One, unmistakably, was Clara, her chestnut braid visible as she paused on a trail, unaware of the lens. Whitaker's heart sank as she bagged the evidence, each item a silent accusation. The photos suggested a pattern, a predator who watched and waited. Vernon, apprehended at his job site an hour later, was calm, almost detached, as deputies cuffed him. "I don't know what this is about," he said, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding Whitaker's. He was taken to the sheriff's office for questioning, where he sat in a gray sweatshirt, his hands folded, refusing to speak without a lawyer. Mia and Ethan were updated that afternoon in Whitaker's office. The news hit like a wave. Mia's hand shook as she gripped a tissue, her voice breaking. "Is that it? Is she gone?" Ethan, his face pale, stared at the floor, his fists clenched. Whitaker chose her words carefully. "We've got strong evidence linking him to Clara's backpack. We're building the case. But we don't have her yet." The unspoken question, whether Clara was alive, hung in the air, too heavy to answer. Ethan's eyes met Whitaker's, burning with a silent demand, "Find her." The investigation dug deeper. Vernon's truck yielded more, a hidden compartment under the passenger seat, containing a knife with a worn handle and a coil of rope, both sent for forensic testing. Cell tower data placed Vernon's phone near the Laurel Creek trailhead on October 12, 2018, within an hour of Clara's last sighting. His work log showed he'd been assigned to a trail maintenance job that day, giving him a reason to be in the park. But the photos in his shed, some dating back a decade, suggested Clara wasn't his only target. Whitaker's team cross-referenced missing persons cases in the region, flagging 2 other women who'd vanished in Virginia parks over the past 8 years. The pattern was tentative but chilling. Interrogating Vernon proved frustrating. His lawyer, a public defender with a sharp gaze, stonewalled, demanding specifics the team wasn't ready to reveal. Vernon maintained his silence, his face a mask of indifference, though Whitaker noticed his fingers twitch when shown a photo of Clara's backpack. "We know you were there," she said, leaning across the table. "Your DNA's on her things. Talk to us, Paul. Help us understand." He stared past her, his lips a thin line, and the room grew heavy with the weight of what he wouldn't say. Meanwhile, the community reeled. News of Vernon's arrest spread through Staunton like wildfire. The Find Clara Hensley page flooded with speculation and outrage. Locals who'd known Vernon, bought him a beer, waved as he mowed park lawns, struggled to reconcile the quiet man with the monster emerging in the evidence. Mia and Ethan, barred from the investigation's details, clung to each update, their hope tempered by dread. Mia visited the trailhead daily, staring at the path where Clara had vanished, whispering, "We're close, babe. We're so close." The breakthrough had reopened the case, but the truth remained elusive. The jewelry, the photos, the DNA. They painted a picture of a calculating predator, but Clara's fate was still a question mark. Was she hidden somewhere in the vast park, her remains buried like her backpack? Or was there a chance, however slim, that she was alive? Whitaker's team expanded their search, focusing on areas Vernon frequented, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. The Blue Ridge, with its endless ridges and shadowed hollows, seemed to watch, its silence as impenetrable as ever. As October waned, the investigation stood at a precipice. Vernon's arrest was a victory, but without a confession or Clara's remains, it was incomplete. Whitaker, sleepless and driven, pored over the evidence late into the night, the photos of Clara and the other women haunting her. The forest had given up one secret, but it held others, and the race was on to uncover them before Vernon's silence, or the Blue Ridge itself, buried the truth forever. November 2023 settled over the Shenandoah National Park with a quiet chill, the Blue Ridge Mountains draped in a fog that clung to the trees like a shroud. The arrest of Paul Vernon had ignited Clara Hensley's case, but the truth of her fate remained just beyond reach, a shadow in the vast wilderness. Lieutenant Sarah Whitaker, her eyes heavy from sleepless nights, felt the weight of every hour as her team pressed for answers. The evidence, Clara's backpack, the jewelry, the photos found in Vernon's shed, pointed to a predator, but without Clara's remains or a confession, the case teetered on the edge of closure. Vernon's interrogation stretched into days, his lawyer deflecting questions with practiced ease. But on November 10th, under mounting pressure from the evidence and a plea deal offering reduced charges, Vernon broke. In a sterile interview room, his voice low and detached, he began to speak. "It wasn't planned," he said, staring at the table, his fingers tracing invisible patterns. "She was just there." Whitaker leaned forward, her heart pounding, as Vernon described encountering Clara on the Laurel Creek Loop on October 12, 2018. He'd been clearing a fallen tree, he claimed, when he saw her sketching by the trail, her focus on her journal. Something in her solitude, her unguarded ease, triggered an impulse he couldn't explain, a need to possess, to control. His confession was chilling in its banality. He'd followed her, staying out of sight, until she reached a remote stretch of the trail. There, he said, he'd approached her, offering help with a non-existent trail issue. When Clara, wary, tried to walk away, he panicked, grabbing her. The struggle was brief, he claimed, and ended with Clara unconscious after a fall. Vernon's voice grew flat as he described dragging her body to a hidden cave, a place he'd found years earlier while exploring off-trail sites for work. "I didn't mean to kill her," he said, his eyes distant. "It just happened." Whitaker pressed for details, her voice steady despite the rage in her chest. "Where is she, Paul? Take us to her." On November 12th, Vernon led a team to the cave, a narrow fissure in a granite outcrop 3 miles from the clearing where Ellen Pritchard's dog had found Clara's backpack. The site was nearly invisible, cloaked by dense rhododendrons and a curtain of vines. Cadavered dogs confirmed the presence of remains before the team even entered. Inside, in a shallow alcove, they found Clara's body, skeletal but intact, her green fleece still clinging to her frame. Nearby was her missing backpack strap, a silver hoop earring, and a single hiking boot, its blue lace frayed but unmistakable. The forensic team worked in silence, their lights casting stark shadows on the cave walls, each piece of evidence a testament to Clara's final moments. Vernon's confession extended beyond Clara. The photos in his shed, he admitted, were part of a ritual, watching women in the park, cataloging their movements. Though he claimed Clara was his only victim, the other jewelry, he said, came from keepsakes taken from hikers' cars or trails, a compulsion he'd fed for years without crossing into violence, until Clara. Whitaker's team cross-referenced his claims with missing persons cases, finding no matches, but the possibility of other victims lingered, a shadow they'd chased for years. Mia and Ethan were called to the sheriff's office that evening. Whitaker, her face drawn, delivered the news with a gentleness she'd honed over years of breaking hearts. "We found her," she said, her voice soft. "I'm so sorry." Mia collapsed into Ethan's arms, her sobs echoing in the small room, while Ethan stared blankly, his grief a quiet storm. The confirmation of Clara's death was a wound, but it was also a release, a truth after 5 years of torment. "Can we see her?" Mia whispered. Whitaker shook her head. "Not yet. The coroner needs time. But we'll take care of her." The recovery of Clara's remains sent ripples through Staunton. The Find Clara Hensley Facebook page became a virtual memorial, flooded with condolences and memories of Clara's sketches, her laugh, her love for the mountains. The media descended again, their cameras capturing the somber procession of forensic vans leaving the park. Vernon was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. His trial set for the following spring. Prosecutors hinted at a possible plea to avoid a death penalty, but for Mia and Ethan, justice felt secondary to the ache of loss. The community responded with action. The Shenandoah National Park implemented new safety measures, additional trail cameras, ranger patrols, and signage warning hikers to travel in pairs. A local group, inspired by Clara, launched a nonprofit to fund search and rescue training, ensuring future cases wouldn't languish. At the Laurel Creek trailhead, a bronze plaque was installed, engraved with Clara's name and a sketch of a mountain ridge, a tribute to her love for the Blue Ridge. The dedication ceremony, held in December 2023, drew hundreds, their lanterns glowing in the dusk as they walked the trail in silence, honoring Clara's memory. Mia and Ethan found solace in small rituals. Mia kept Clara's sketchbooks on her bedside table, flipping through them when sleep wouldn't come. Ethan hiked the Laurel Creek Loop weekly, not to search but to feel close to his sister, pausing at her favorite overlook to watch the valley unfold below. The forest, once a thief, became a place of quiet communion, its beauty no longer tainted by secrets. "She's still here," Ethan told Mia one evening, his voice steady. "In the trees, the wind. She's part of it now." The role of chance haunted them. If Juniper, the border collie, hadn't dug in that clearing, if Ellen Pritchard hadn't wandered that remote path, Vernon might have remained a ghost, his crimes buried with Clara. The fragility of justice, the randomness of a dog's instinct, left Mia and Ethan grappling with a bittersweet truth. Closure came at a cost, but it came. At the ceremony, Mia spoke briefly, her voice trembling but clear. Clara loved these mountains. They were her home. We lost her, but we found her because of love. Ours, yours, even a dog's. Thank you. As winter settled over the Blue Ridge, the park exhaled its quiet beauty. The ridges cloaked in snow, the trails silent but no longer menacing. Clara's story, etched in grief and resilience, became a part of the landscape, a reminder of its dual nature, sanctuary and shadow, solace and danger. For Mia, Ethan, and the community, the resolution was not an end but new beginning, a chance to carry Clara's light forward, even as the mountain stood watch, eternal and unyielding.